Hey everybody, Bren here. Welcome back to another King's Indian attack speedrun. Today we're going to be playing against d5. So let's get started with our setup here. Playing g3 and bishop g2. So they're going for a Slav setup where they haven't brought their bishop outside of the pawn chain. If it was outside of the pawn chain, I would kind of call it like a reverse London. But inside the pawn chain, this is a Slav. So let's castle. This is also our first time playing against a 1500, so that's a big deal for us, which is great. Because they are playing kind of like in this, like, is it indiscreetly? I don't speak good. I don't speak good. I'm thinking of playing e4. The thing is, the thing I was trying to say is whenever they play this type of setup, you can generally play e4 or c4, and I don't think either position will hurt you really much. Okay, so they decide not to trade queens, which is, I think, fair. The thing is, this knight is actually really awkward, and they're not castling long, so I'm just going to play queen e2. Queen e2 could run into b6, bishop a6, but I guess I could go queen e2 and rook d1 in that time. That looks reasonable. Do they ever go e5? Maybe. Let's go queen e2. Again, if they go b6, I'm kind of saying that's actually something to celebrate about. Because even though they get bishop a6, I can just go rook d1, and they do weaken this long diagonal for me. So let's keep developing here. I like knight to d2. I might go to c4, trying to attack the bishop. But I do have another idea in mind here. And actually, my idea was to try to get rid of this knight, because the knight on g6 was a bit clumsy, and this kind of does my job for me in a very good way. Because now if I play the move knight takes e5, I'm not exactly sure how they should respond to this. What if I play f4 here? f4, bishop d4, and then king h1. It's a little surprising opening my king like this, but we are significantly more developed than our opponents, and we can see them running into problems because of it. I like knight to f3 here, attacking the bishop. If they go bishop f6, I'm going to play e5 and completely close off their bishop. And if they go there, that's okay. I'll just play something like a4, pretend to threaten the bishop. And I think it's time to fianchetto this guy. Bring him to c3, and then play a5 as well. a5 is a very good move to throw in. Generally, these a4, a5s, and these hyper-modern positions feel extremely comfortable. And I think there's no exception to the rule in this case as well. Because now, after we play the move bishop c3, they don't want to play b6 ever, or b5. We take on Bassan, or we take on b6 in all those cases. And that's just not a fun position for them to play, because the second they do that, they split their pawns. So since they went f6, never play it, by the way, we have to ask ourselves, do we want to go for e5 or leave the tension? Because generally it looks like they're going to try to do something themselves. I like the idea of e5 here. Opening up this bishop further. Generally, you want to be careful that it doesn't weaken your king, but luckily our bishop's really good, and I don't think it will weaken our king at all. Because after this, I'm kind of expecting f5. But I think there's problems with their position now, and some of them have to do with knight to g5. Where knight to g5 attacks the e6 pawn, and also threatens moves like queen to h5. But I think we can leave that in reserve. So I'm not really in a rush to play it. I'm just going to bring this a rook surprisingly over. Do I even need to do that? I think that this f rook might be doing less. Because I'm wondering if I ever want to play bishop b4 to d6. The thing is, I do have to worry about c5. Now it's kind of helping the process a little bit if I play bishop to b4. There's also knight to g5. Let's start with bishop to b4. Ask them what they're doing. because this guy is pinned to the rook behind it. There might be knight to e4 anyways, which is interesting. Yeah, I think there might have been knight to e4 anyways, because they do have the f2 square to look at. But I'm going to play knight to g5. And this does have some threats. So my idea here is queen to h5. And if they take, then I can just take on e8 instead. I could also try taking on c5. I wasn't really sure if I wanted to do that. I was thinking maybe something like knight h3. But queen h5 looks reasonable. Trying to figure out where they move it, because if they go here, then I'm considering something like knight h3. Maybe we shouldn't go crazy. And we should just give up the bishop pair in this position by taking on c5. If they take on g5, then we'll just take on a7. And yeah, let's just move back and just claim that, you know what? You know what we're going to do here? The problem for them is that they have this tall pawn. It is essentially a tall pawn. A dream for us is actually to play a pawn to c5 and b4. And then it locks out both of their bishops, actually. So let's actually try to orchestrate that, if we can. I want to start with a move like c4. Okay, so they're actively trying to make sure that doesn't happen, which makes a lot of sense. I think I can go queen c4 here, though. And queen c4 is aimed towards playing b4. Right now, their bishop is hit, so they can't actually take on a5 yet. And b5 doesn't work either, because we can take. I'm actively just trying to play against this one piece. If this one piece stays bad, then they're pretty much playing down a piece. And that is a nightmare scenario for our opponents. It's also nice just because the queen also does look at, for example, the e6 pawn. Now there's b4. And after b4, they move away. We could try taking on c6 here. But the thing is, they do have bishop e7, or they do have bishop takes. But I think no matter what, we can take on b6 at the end of it, right? b4, bishop f8, and then we take on c6, and then take on b6. Yeah, let's start with b4. And again, we're going to take on c6 and then b6. And a lot of stuff is coming off the board, and I think we're going to be up a pawn at the end of it. But it's not even guaranteed that I'm going to do that. I might play something really surprising here, giving up an exchange. This might be the one of those few times where I think giving up an exchange is probably the best idea. And I do not need to do this, but I'm playing for activity. And I feel like it's extremely likely that my opponent is actually going to go for this. If I play rook to d6, they're probably going to take it. And I don't think it's correct to. But hey, I said I would stay materially minded. So maybe I shouldn't. And just play the move knight to d4. Let's play knight to d4, because this feels a little bit more principled. We're just attacking the c6 weakness. If they play c5, then they do lose the rook in the corner. We don't want to take it yet, because it does weaken our king significantly. But we do have threats of moves like knight takes f5 in the position as well. So if c5, maybe just knight takes f5. That looks extremely reasonable. And then I can play knight to d6. If c5, knight takes f5, then I have to look at b5. But luckily I have queen a2. Not queen b3. Queen b3 would be a bit of a mistake. So yeah, it looks like that's actually going to happen in the game. So again, after knight takes f5 here, we want to make sure that if b5 is played, we play queen to a2. We don't really care about staying in connection with the b4 pawn, because right now if we play queen b3, then there's c4 attacking our queen again, and our queen is hit on b3, and our knight would be hit after because the pin would be gone. So I think knight takes f5 is the correct move. But again, we really need to follow it up with queen to a2 after b5. I don't really care about the rook in the corner because it does weaken our king significantly. As you can see, if they got a check on this diagonal somehow and got it unopposed or something, then that just looks awful. Great. Yeah, so queen to a2. Is there any other ideas here? Doesn't really look like it. Queen to a2 feels like a reasonable choice. And now we move our knight. I feel like knight to d6 is good. Good. And if they play bishop to b7, trying to challenge the diagonal, the problem is e6 hangs just in time. All right. This looks like a free rook in the corner now, finally. Like a free rook. So it looks like I'm going to take it. And then I'll retreat. It wasn't really good to take earlier, but now it does feel good. And there were so many times during this game where I wanted to sacrifice exchanges or sacrifice stuff, but I'm okay with sacrificing stuff, but I want to kind of hold back at least a little bit. All right, let's go bishop to g2, and if bishop to b7, I'll take on e6 with my rook. Because if they want to take on g2, that's a-okay by me. All right. They don't have any way to exploit the fact that my king is here. They can give a check here or whatever, but it doesn't matter. Yeah, I'm just up a rook in this situation. This is completely winning. It would be best if we could find a way to trade. If we can't, no worries. It happens. I like moves like rook. I wish rook d1 were reasonable, but it's not quite playable. I don't want to give them too much leeway here either. Maybe the move queen to f5, and this just kind of babysits the c2 pawn, prepares moves like rook d1. If they ever give a check on the long diagonal, I probably just go king h3 actually. I don't really see anything wrong with it. So I'm just going to go... Oh, I can take here actually. Is there any way to exploit this? They can't give a check here or here. So it looks like a6 is actually going to be what I do. I'm going to take this. Okay, sweet. I'm a little low on time, so I should be careful. Oh, I'm in check. I forgot. Let's go. Let's go up. Did I allow queen f5 check? G4, queen d3. And then king h4. And if g5, then I go king h5, I think, surprisingly. Okay, let's give a check. And let's just get the pieces closer together because I'm a little concerned that I might have, you know, allowed things that I didn't really need to. There we go. Queen's on f3. That feels like a good square. And I'm ready to start pushing my a-pawn. I got to be careful. I am pretty low on time. There's no increment. All right. Now I'll go rook b1. Is there any checks that I'm missing? I don't think so. Nothing that harms me, at least. And queen takes b3 is threatened. Looks like this is going to be A win, as long as we play a little bit faster. So I'm going to focus a little bit here at the very end because don't want to mess up. B2, I'll just take it like this. All right, good. Everything's defended well. Let's go F5. Kind of a funny move, but I want to go F6. And whose king is weaker? Kind of an interesting question. Looks like it's theirs. They might have to play Queen F7, which they do not want to do. But if they, you know, have to end up doing that, then I just push my A pawn, actually. Yeah, so F7 here looks like a win. Again, there's no checks in the position. If they go Queen D4, then I just go Rook F2. They can push, but then I promote. And that's going to be stronger because I'm going to be mating them. Because after they promote, I'll start giving them checks. And pretty much whenever there's races like that, whoever gives the checks first usually will have some sort of advantage because of it. So I think they missed Queen D3 check here. Maybe they didn't. You never know. But Queen D3 check will pick up the pawn. And let's go Queen H7 check. Ensure that they cannot do anything with this guy. And we'll start pushing. So luckily we do not even need this A pawn here. What we can do is just move a knight move away the whole time, but I think actually a cleaner way is just to promote another piece. Wouldn't hurt. Yeah, and they end up resigning. So there's definitely some mistakes in there, and I think they mainly revolve around this position. So first off, I would like to say that, yeah, knight e5 wasn't really too inspiring. Generally, the knight doesn't feel like it belongs on g6 here. Knight f6 is much, much more preferred. It prevents e4. At least it tries to do a little bit of a better job preventing e4. And it only takes one move instead of two. The problem is, I'm always threatening moves like h4, h5, just to kick the knight. And then the knight has to move away, and they've gained a lot of valuable space on the king side. I was expecting a queen trade there, but that's okay. Knight bd2, and again, yeah, knight e5 immediately. It's just not really so great. F4 I thought would be interesting. Maybe knight c4 is better. You know what I missed with f4 is actually bishop takes b2. Bishop takes, queen b6 check, and then they can pick up the bishop. The funny thing is, it doesn't matter too much. Knight c4 and knight d6 look like they're coming. This looks like a little bit of a problem. I might even just like play c3 or something here, just to see what happens. c3, they probably can't take it. Yeah, they can't take it. They just lose on the spot. They have to play something like queen c5 or queen e7. If queen takes c3, knight d6 check is just way too strong. It's not really the most useful move ever, though. You can just play the moves like rook a b1 or rook a fd1 instead. Anyways, yeah, so maybe f4 was just a little too much. Generally, I've said this many times during the series. You want to be very cautious of playing pushing your f pawn whenever the center is potentially able to open. And in this game, the center was definitely more likely to open than in other structures where the center is completely locked, because there were central pawns missing, which means that if flank pawns start trading, then the center opens despite them being flank pawns. That's kind of what happened here, right? When we go through, this might not immediately look like it's possible to open, but you got to be careful. Yeah, like, I don't know, like at the same time, this still feels extremely good. Rook fd1, I don't really feel too bad about. I should have been careful a little bit more maybe of knight e4, but I don't think it matters too much. Like if knight e4 here, I think what I could do as a last resort is always play bishop e1. So I'm not really worried there. Or bishop d6 looks like it's totally fine, because they can't really go knight f2 because I just take on f2. That's a desperado sacrifice where they can capture back, but then they lose their own queen. And if they take here, well then it looks like I can actually just take here and play something like knight e5. Or actually, no, sorry, d7 is actually just much better. I should have said that instead. Anyways, oh, okay, yeah, so this might not have been the best way to go. Queen h5 is something that I was thinking about. Looked like it was interesting. And the reason why I didn't play is, yeah, because what if rook f8 or rook e7 or something? And then it's unclear what my knight's doing here, and I should probably play knight h3. And then I'm kind of like sidelining my own pieces to go for an attack that wasn't really there in the first place. And the idea of knight h3 is obviously I want to bring my queen back at some point, but also it helps that it does help prevent the knight coming to f2, where I can finally take it. Yeah, so that was a little bit aimless, honestly, but that's okay. This still feels like a extremely comfortable position. b4 looks like it was correct, and yeah, supposedly I should have actually gone for this variation, and this was the best thing to do. And this isn't surprising. The reason why I'm gonna say it isn't surprising is because, well, we do have kingside weaknesses a little bit more than they do, just because the long diagonal is only being challenged by their bishop, but when there's queens on the board, they're also challenging it with their queen. Whereas for us, it feels a little bit more awkward to defend it with our queen, like putting our queen on one of these two squares. And the bishop also can come to this diagonal and cause some mayhem as well. So there are reasonable kingside safety issues that we'd have to worry about. Luckily, things worked out for us, and it looked like tactically we're actually a-okay here after knight d4, and I was considering a takes b because, well, they have to take it. But after this, I don't know why I wasn't so interested in this. This looks extremely strong, actually. And maybe we can even take on a8. C takes d4, and then, I don't know, like queen takes d4? Oh, queen takes d4. I don't know if there's any like bishop b7 check. Doesn't really look like it. It looks like it's completely winning, actually. So I wouldn't really worry about that. Queen a2 is actually not really the best way to try here. I shouldn't have just like allowed... Well, what I was thinking is if they play something like c4 and then I go like knight d6 and get a position like this. This felt extremely comfortable, especially they don't have any dark square bishop. I can just play c3. a6 is actually a weakness, even if they play bishop to b7 at some point. Like bishop b7, I just go like c3 here. And now the fianchetto actually makes a lot of sense, which is really nice. The queen fianchetto, that is. And it looks like the weaknesses should all be defended. Queen e3 is the only thing to look at, but queen to d2. And rook to f1 is coming, and then their queen will be ejected, which is important. But okay. I would say, yeah, so that was definitely a mistake on my part here, allowing... Yeah, they really should have played bishop to b7 here. And I'm really surprised that they didn't. This move just hangs the rook in the corner. Generally, again, it wasn't really hanging. Like, even here, I don't think you should ever touch that piece. Because it looks like, yeah, we're just getting mated here, right? Bishop c5 check. Yeah, we're just getting mated at this point, really. So... That's if rook d4 is the top move, then that spells trouble. So yeah, that's why I wasn't taking it before, is because the compensation, like there's difference between like, okay, there's an equal amount of compensation, or maybe they have like a good amount, and then there's like, if we take a piece we're losing. That's why I wasn't taking the rook. Generally I have been taking material if I can, if it's worth it. And yeah, this was kind of just an experiment mainly of, hey, what happens if we play positions where we, I guess, yeah, where we play f4. Kind of like a normal King's Indian defense, where you generally go for f4 quite a bit. And yeah, in some ways it worked out, and in other ways, maybe not as much. I think it was still a really interesting game and something that we can take stuff away from it. Where again, generally, despite the fact that even going for these F4 things, like the only problem with it actually, again, was mainly this bishop takes b2, which I completely missed, honestly. But we still have a reasonable position regardless. And I still want to try to make some aggressive moves like this in the future. I was originally planning knight to c4 and if bishop to f6, e5, getting a position like this. I thought this would be like overwhelming. Because if they castle, then they're just asking for trouble with bishop h6. And yeah, it looks like they're close to lost. Actually, they're just lost here, which is good for us, definitely. Going up an exchange like this, where we didn't really do anything to, at least do anything too crazy. It was more so our opponent just played like knight e7, g6 to e5, and then all these moves kind of come naturally. And yeah, instead of castling, they kind of have to play like a French, where you play king f8, and if you got to play king f8 like this, then you're already in trouble when white's extremely well developed and can play moves like h4, h5 to try to soften up the kingside a little bit, create some targets. Like if you ever get h6 in, that'd be great. Even if not, it's just a nice space gaining move. It sounds like I'm obsessed with making these like rook pawn moves, like pushing the h pawn and pushing the a pawn, which isn't actually true. Generally, I like to do anything but that, unless I think that's an extremely flexible option. Like if I think, oh, I can, push this pawn, or I can like shuffle a piece. If I feel like the piece isn't improving, I'd rather just push the pawn, because at least you gain space with the pawn. But also, I want to make sure, it's not becoming a weakness. Like, is the pawn on h4 creating weaknesses? Luckily, it's not in these cases, because it's hard to attack. Even if you push the a pawn or something, it's not really easy to attack if you push it to like a4. But that's an example of something I wouldn't do here. And the big reason is because where's the weaknesses for them? Their weakness is their king. So I would be pushing on this side of the board, trying to gain space over there. That's going to cover it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed. That was a little crazy, but I've been trying to relax a little bit more when I play these games, because I'm trying not to like, just lose my mind. And I think that's important. All right. Thank you for watching, and I will see you tomorrow with another game. Bye-bye.